Kissinger is right. There's concern about the future of the conflict in Ukraine. What do they fear might happen along the way to the citizens of Europe? The historian, professor of Harvard University, Neil Ferguson, in his article in Bloomberg, invokes Kissinger, saying that he is right to worry about an impending world war. As he writes, among other things, he says, even a small war is hell for those involved in it, of course, but a world war is the worst thing we have ever done to each other. In a memorable essay published last month, Henry Kissinger asked how to avoid another world war. Kissinger asked an important question. Is the world today at a comparable turning point as the opportunity for peace in 1916 in the Ukraine, as winter forces a pause in large-scale military operations there? This time last year, I predicted that Russia would invade Ukraine. The question a year later is whether there is a way to end this war or whether it is destined to escalate into something much bigger. As Kissinger rightly points out, two nuclear-armed powers are currently contesting the fate of Ukraine. One side, Russia, is directly involved in conventional warfare, but the US and its allies are fighting indirectly by providing Ukraine with what Alex Karp, chief executive of Palantir Technology, calls the power of advanced algorithmic warfare systems. These are now so powerful, he recently told Washington Post David Ignatius that they are equivalent to having tactical nuclear weapons against the adversary with only conventional ones. Take a moment to consider the implication of this. The war is back. Could World War also return? If so, it will affect all of our lives. In the second interwar era, 1991 to 2019, we forgot the role of war in the global economy because the wars of that era were small. Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq. We forgot the war is history's favorite driver of inflation, bankruptcies, even families. This is because large-scale war is both destructive to productive capacity, disrupts trade, and destabilizes fiscal and monetary policies. Throughout history, the primary source of power has been technologically superiority in equipment, including information and communications. Therefore, a critical question is, what are the key inputs without which a state-of-the-art army is unachievable? In 1914, it was coal, iron, and the manufacturing capacity to mass-produce artillery and shells, as well as steamships. In 1939, it was oil, steel, aluminum manufacturing capacity to mass-produce artillery, ships, submarines, airplanes, and tanks. After 1945, it was all of the above, plus the scientific and technical capability to produce nuclear weapons. Today, the vital inputs are the ability to mass-produce high-performance semiconductors, satellites, and the algorithmic warfare systems that they depend on. The US is still bad at deterrence. Last year, they failed to prevent President Putin from invading Ukraine, largely because they had low confidence in the Ukrainian defense forces they had trained and the government in Kiev that controlled them. The latest target of American deterrence is Taiwan, a functionally autonomous republic that China claims as its own. So what will the US do to control these adversaries? The answer sounds remarkably similar to what's going on in a Cold War. We will assemble the strongest possible coalitions to advance and defend a world that is free, open, prosperous, and secure. We will prioritize maintaining a sustained competitive advantage over China while containing a deeply dangerous Russia. We will ensure that strategic adversaries cannot exploit fundamental American and allied technologies, know-how, or data to undermine American and allied security. In other words, form and maintain alliance and try to prevent the other side from technologically upgrading. P.S. Russia has already reached significant levels of technology. This is a Cold War strategy in all but name. The problems of U.S. strategy and fear of civil uprising. There is two obvious problems with the U.S. strategy. The first is that if algorithmic weapon systems are the equivalent of tactical nuclear weapons, Putin may eventually be led to use the latter, since he clearly lacks the former. The second is that Biden administration appears to have entrusted the timetable for any peace talks to Kiev, Ukraine that is, and the terms the Ukrainians are demanding are clearly unacceptable to Russia. Therefore, the war seems destined, like the Korean War in Cold War I, to continue until a stalemate is reached. Hence, the real goal is the poverty of citizens of the Western for a defeated junta and a great reset. The problem with protracted wars is that the US and European publics tend to tire of them long before the enemy does. P.S. Here they may be fearing an early unchecked downfall because of the state of the economy, which may lead to decisions. I'm concerned with what is this implication for the future of the world peace. America's Achilles heel is often seen as its unsustainable fiscal path. At some point in the next decade, according to the Congressional Budget Office, interest payments on the federal debt are likely to exceed defense spending. Meanwhile, it's not immediately obvious who will buy all the additional treasuries issued each year if the Federal Reserve engages in quantitative tightening. Does this give China an opportunity to put economic pressure on the U.S.? As has often been pointed out, if China chooses to dump its government bonds, it would send U.S. bond yields higher and lower the dollar, but not without causing itself considerable pain. However, America's greatest vulnerability may lie in the realm of the resources rather than finance. The U.S. has long since ceased to be a manufacturing economy. They have become a big importer from the rest of the world. China's growing dominance in both of these areas should not be underestimated. Beijing's Belt and Road Initiatives has created infrastructure that reduces Chinese dependence on maritime trade. Meanwhile, Shanghai Westwell Lab Information Technologies is rapidly developing into the leading supplier of the most advanced port operation systems. The war in Ukraine has reminded us that the trade disruption is a vital weapon of war. It also reminds us that the great power must be able to mass produce modern weapons with or without access to imports. So Kissinger is right. Kissinger is right to worry about the dangers of world war. The First and Second World Wars are preceded by smaller conflicts, the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 13, the Italian invasion of Abyssinia in 1936, the Spanish Civil War 1936 to 39, the Sino-Japanese War 1937, the Russian invasion of Ukraine in a worst-case scenario could be a similar harbinger of a much wider war. And this I translated for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box